Good morning, afternoon, evening, depending on where you are, everyone, and welcome to today's panel discussion on a people-first culture, connecting the dots between company culture and employee experience. My name is Rod Hutchings. I'm coming from Melbourne, Australia, and it's like midnight here, so it's nice and late here. So as we navigate the evolving workplace, many workers really look to instill meaning, purpose in all areas of their life, and particularly at work. So today we'll delve into the concepts of employee experience, culture, and engagement, and explore the differences and and we'll discuss how they interconnect. So I'm really looking forward to today's conversation, discussion. Put questions in the chat as we go. But before we get into the discussion, obviously we need our panelists to come forward. So I welcome our panelists. And probably good morning for you, I'm imagining, but good morning. And if we just start with just introducing yourselves, and we'll just go around clockwise, starting with Emma. So welcome, Emma.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Great to be here. Yes, I'm Emma McKee. I am a Senior Director of Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, Belonging, and Culture for a national nonprofit, and excited for the conversation today.
Thanks, Emma. And is it Dalit?
Yes, hi. So for me, it's also good afternoon. Coming to you from Israel. Very happy to be here. I'm an independent consultant, mainly in the area of culture and leadership. Very exciting. Looking forward for this discussion.
Excellent. So we've got an international cast here. And welcome, Heather.
Thank you. My name's Heather. I've been in HR for about 17 years, mostly in technology. I'm currently head of HR for a consulting company. And I'm in Canada, so representing from up north.
Very nice. I still haven't been to Canada. I want to go to Canada. And welcome, Angela.
Hi, thank you. Yes, I've spent 25 years architecting and implementing programs across all aspects of the talent lifecycle. I love talking about all things employee engagement and employee experience and culture. So excited to be here. And now I partner externally with organizations and help them shape their talent strategy. And I'm also adjunct faculty in a master's HR program. And I'm coming to you from Colorado.
Very nice. Thank you, Angela. And last but not least, Frank.
Hey, hello, everyone. Frank, pronouns he, him, his, head of equity, inclusion, belonging for a QSR industry. My father and my husband centralized in the U.S. Central Time Zone. So happy to be with you all.
Excellent. All right. So we might just start. Hopefully, this is a small question, but an intro question, which is employee experience, culture, engagement. Like, what is each? What do we mean by that? What are the difference between each? So there's probably a few questions in one there. But I might come to Emma first. So do you want to start us off, Emma, on what your thoughts are? And then
Sure.
we'll jump in.
Sure, absolutely. So when I think about the employee experience, it's all of the moments, all of the interactions that make up the day-to-day life of an employee, from the moment they are a candidate or interested in a job through the very last day that they're with your organization. It's really a culmination of all of the different things that impact their day-to-day, including the benefits, the leadership, development. It really is all encompassing, which is why it's such a wonderful thing to dig into. And then when I think about organizational culture, it's the norms and behaviors that align with the mission and goals of an organization, right? And so I'll leave it there and let other people chime in as well.
Thanks, Emma. And I think you hit the nail on the head there. I think you're definitely employee experiences from when you start until you and when you've left as well. Who would like to add to this?
I can. I completely agree with you, Emma. That was well said. And I think the experience is really how the culture manifests itself into those day-to-day experiences. And it's kind of the tactical representation of that culture for the employee. So.
Thanks, Heather.
I can add to that. First of all, I totally agree, and I think it's the entire life cycle of employee that should be impacted, by his or her experience. And this is why it's so important for us to design it and to think about it. And then it goes hand in hand with the culture and the fact that we need to design that as well. It's not, I always say that we should design it rather than have it by choice. And I also tell my clients that the culture is the one who runs the company, the day-to-day in the company, because it's in all the discussions, corridors, and it's not the CEO. Obviously, it's the culture who runs the company day in, day out, and this is why it's so essential for us to design it and then deploy it and continue to impact that day in, day out.
No, very, very right. Now, there was one extra word that I had there, which was about engagement. Who would like to tackle engagement? We've spoken about employee experience and culture so far. Anyone want to? What do we mean by engagement?
I mean, I think there's so much that could be said about engagement. It could be defined and measured a number of different ways, but simplistically, in my mind, I think about it's the output informed by the inputs, the persona of both employees, the organization itself, the teams, both behaviorally and structurally. So it's the output of those informs, and sometimes it's also maybe what's not seen sometimes. So it kind of goes, it's intertwined and connected definitely with the employee experience and the culture, and not always, since we're talking about the competitive advantage and connecting the dots, sometimes it's also what's not seen, definitely.
Yeah, thanks, Frank. And I think what's not seen, I think you bring up a good point there. I think particularly this day and age of all this remote work, like, I mean, most times people are working when people aren't watching anyway, but if you're engaged, you're still engaged in and delivering the outcomes you need to do. But if you're not engaged, maybe you've got a brick on your keyboard and you're just looking like you're awake. So like two opposite ends of the spectrum there. But anyone else want to add on to that?
Yeah, if just to kind of pull all of that together, I think of the culture as who we are as a company. And then as we express that across the journey that we just talked about, the life cycle, that becomes the various experiences that we have. And if those two things are congruent, if the culture we say we are, who we are, gets expressed correctly and congruently in those experiences, then we have high engagement. And so as everybody talked about it, we have those inputs and outputs, and they really come together in that way. You drive culture into expressions of the experience, and then that creates the outcome of the engagement.
Thanks, Angela. All right, we might move on to the next question, which is, I guess, why does employee experience and culture actually really matter? Like, can we get away with not focusing on it? So what's the business case for focusing on these areas? And I'll start off with Heather. You want to have a go at that?
Sure. Yeah, I think like Angela was saying, I look at engagement as the output and the result of the culture and the experience on the employee. And we all know that the engagement scores are directly linked to productivity, company efficiency, retention, like all of these really concrete business drivers and financial levers that we have to measure. I think it's integral that culture and experience are in line or you're going to have a really big problem. And this is probably taking it or answering a question that hasn't been asked yet, but I think when it comes to culture, it's organic to a certain extent, and we can't control it, but we can influence and drive it. So we always have to be aware of what our culture is and how it's manifesting in that employee experience, in that day-to-day, and making sure that all of those pieces are done with intent, and really paying attention to, wait, if we give the person this particular experience, what does that say about our culture, and does that really align with our culture and who we are? So constantly taking it a step back to the culture and why we're doing everything in the first place, because they all are very connected and have a really big impact.
Thanks, Heather. Anyone else want to add on to Heather's point?
Yeah,
No?
I'll jump
All
in.
good? Oh, yeah, yes, go, Emma.
Yeah, so when we think about the business case, right, it's about the numbers, I think, and as much as we would love to give people a wonderful experience and have a great culture because it's nice, it really does come down to the success of an organization. And so, to Heather's point, organizations that have a strong and robust culture, they outperform their competitors by 20% in terms of profitability. They have up to 30%. 34% lower turnover rates. And so there are some real bottom line impacts that this has on an organization. And being able to articulate that across the leadership can be a really powerful tool as far as getting buy-in to supporting really powerful and strong employee experiences. And the reason behind putting so much time and effort into organizational culture, there is a real ROI that you can make a business case for.
Thanks, Emma. All right, we might move on again. So I'll come to Frank about this question, which will be, what does a people first culture look like? When we're talking about people first, so bringing that into it.
Yeah, I think so. When I think about people first, it's centering the most, and of course, working in equity, inclusion, belonging. I think it's centering the most vulnerable, the most excluded, populations, whatever that may look like, for whatever business that you do, for whatever function, for whatever geographical area, and really literally reflecting not only the consumer base, but the employee base that's served, right? So you center them, needs are met, and then you take care of the needs of everyone by doing so. And so people-centered, it has a business case as well. I think it's already been said about the business case around that. But yeah, it's centering the most vulnerable populations, or those that have been excluded that you maybe not have thought about.
Okay, who wants to add on to Frank's?
I can add that I think it should appear in most, not in any, but in most of the decisions, in the practical decisions that the business are taking. They're taking the people into account, while taking the tough decision, the business decisions. So it's not, we are not naive, so it's not always can be first people, but in some cases, and for sure it shouldn't be the last every time, which is the easy way to do it. This is how exactly a culture of people first should look like. And more important is the people to feel that someone is looking, and counting them, and they don't need to speak up in order for the management and the entire organization to be aware of their needs. And for me, this is some of it, how it should look like.
Yeah, thanks. I think you're right on there too, isn't it? So it's starting from where people are at. And I mean, for me, like last week, I was away coaching a state under 15 volleyball team, and I was probably at the start of the week, and I went for a whole week. I was very much probably I'll call command and control, like really being a bit of a dictator. And then with my people with my team, and so once I started, having ones-on-ones and understanding some of these kids better, we perform much better as well. So I think that's a big part of just actually understanding who are your employees, and really considering how you make a culture that fits for those people as well is pretty key. Rather than just focusing on, well, we just need to achieve, these many widgets or this outcome. Look at how we work with the people in the business to achieve that outcome. Because like my team, they all wanted to win. There's no question about that. So that was
I think that
yeah. And by the way, we actually end up winning the bronze medal. So
I'd love to add to that we've talked goodness for the last 2 or 3 decades about our people are our greatest resource, people are our greatest asset, all of this language that really it's lip service almost to who our people are. But when we talk about first and people centric, it's about they're not our greatest resource just because they're a resource. They're not our greatest asset because they're not what centers the organization, because they're humans. And those humans in any kind of business, whether your business is about service or your business is about product or your business is something else, it's the people behind it that make that business work. And understanding that and centering every decision on what those people need and what those people, how those people interact changes the outcome of your business for the better. Increasing performance, therefore increasing productivity, therefore increasing your profits. And we see that over and over again, that businesses in any industry that learn that secret do better. Not considering their people just one of their many resources, but the ultimate, centered piece.
Yeah, thanks, Ange. I think you're right. Exactly, is that research does show that that's exactly the case, isn't it? Businesses do better when you're focusing on people. All right, we'll move on to the next. So we agree, we understand a bit now about what we're talking about with people first culture and employee engagement. So what are the pitfalls? What are common pitfalls that organizations encounter when we try to implement this sort of people first culture? And I might start this one with Dalit, if you'd like to have a go at that.
Yeah, sure. So it's quite similar also to what I said before, but usually when I'm talking about culture, and we see different organizations, but most of them have the same values, and I think the difference between those is when two values are coming to a crossroad, who is getting the right to move forward, right? So. And if people first is competing with another value, like for example, as I said, business or teamwork or something like that, what will win? And this is where organizations are falling. This is exactly when we're starting to see the pitfalls, that they will choose over and over again to go with the business or to go with other values that are not people first, because it's too complex, it's too difficult. Sometimes it's too expensive. Maybe even it's too slow for them, and this is how they are choosing, to go with a different value rather than the people first. And I find myself, I served as a VP HR and CHRO in many different global organizations for more than 20 years. And I found myself time and time again sitting in management and reminding them what actually we meant by choosing to be people first company, how we should stick to it, and what does it mean. So we have the short term, maybe this is what we need to do right now, but how much it will cost us later on in the long term if we choose to turn right rather than left, and to choose something different than the people first. and not to take our people into account. And we spoke about, you said many things around the motivation and the engagement, and what happens when we choose other values and not, putting our people at the center. So this is, and later on, we are starting with one very minor, turn outside of the people first area, and then it's very easy to do more and more and more decisions that are getting away from the people first culture that we so much want to stick with. So this is how, I see the starting to the pitfall in companies.
Thanks, Dilette. Anyone want to add on to that?
I can share a few thoughts.
Yeah.
I think a pitfall that companies make is thinking culture is only top down. I think you have to know who your employees are, what their values are, how they behave, how they feel, in order to influence that or to either pull or add value at all. And I think sometimes companies make that mistake. Culture is so incredibly strong, both organically and probably not organically as well. And you really have to acknowledge that. We all know that saying that, what is it, culture eats strategy for breakfast. I'm sure we've all heard that. And it's true. So you really have to know who you are before you can influence it.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks, Emma.
I would add that embracing a funnel. So, everybody for the last, it's about to go on 3 decades now, but it's been some time around primal leadership. Daniel Goleman and his talk about setting up and his premise around, emotional intelligence actually doesn't even talk about that much. He talks more about communication first and talks about this funnel. The funnel that the higher up we go, the less we actually know. And I think a huge pitfall, because nobody wants to tell, and it's inherited over generations, right? You don't tell those in power and charge bad news or off with your, like you always tell them the good news. And so the pitfall is, what don't I know? And to have the point, it absolutely does not just leadership, it's everyone, but leaders often are the kind of victim of that, should I say, or the kind of final where, everything's great. Our engagement scores are 5 out of 5 and our employee experience is that. I don't hear any bad news and our sales are great, but what don't I know? And that's a huge pitfall that can be simply remedied with skip leveling. And I'll tell you, I can't tell you how many organizations I've either consulted or been in-house where they said, what's a skip level? So if you don't know what a skip level is literally skip a level beyond your directs and go granular, right? And listening, just listening. And you will find out a lot of qualitative, but then turns into quantitative information that will inform things that you didn't know, and embrace those things. Embrace those things, because that's also your culture as well. That also is your employee experience. And those are also dots that need to be kind of relationship routed in your organization that I promise, will surface in its most opportunistic time. If one thing we all learned globally through COVID was all those below the surface things now came up. Your business was not as sound as you thought. Your processes were not as sound as you thought. Your well-being policies and structure were not as sound as you thought. And those that had a little bit more competitive advantage were the ones that I think not maybe necessarily embraced it, but maybe had a little bit to kind of back it up, right? So it's a huge opportunity to the funnel is what I'll say, the funnel.
No, thanks. That's some excellent gems in there, Frank. So that was really fascinating. And so building on that, I guess with this funnel, you're talking about leadership. I come to Emma here, and that's going to be about Okay, well then what role does leadership play in shaping this culture and its impact on employee experience and this people first? So over to you,
Yeah,
Emma.
absolutely. And I love that we have just been talking about leadership already. So it's a great segue into this topic. So leaders play a huge role in organizational culture. And as it's already been discussed, organizational culture happens organically, right? And there are subcultures as well. And yet there's also really this need for intentionality behind ensuring that an organization's culture aligns with the mission and the vision and the goals. And that's where leadership can play a really critical role. So I think about it in two main ways, though there are many. The first would be connecting the dots. That's what this conversation today is about. Culture can be a hard concept for people to grasp, and to understand how you take culture and translate it into every employee's day-to-day experience, that can be hard for some people to really understand. And so leaders can play a critical role in really communicating that. What does a culture of transparency look like in a team meeting out in location 1 or location 2? What does that really translate to from a day-to-day experience? And leaders can play a big role in communicating that and helping people to understand it. Additionally, they model the culture, right? There's nothing less motivating than having an organizational culture kind of be talked about, and then the leaders doing the complete opposite and not actually living it and modeling it. And so there's really both of those factors, I think, are two ways leaders can really get involved and have a positive impact.
Yeah, thanks, Emma. Anyone want to add on to that? Yes. I think nothing's, more off-putting than when the leader isn't, if they're talking this great culture initiatives or way that we'd like to be working in, and they perform and act in a totally different way. Yeah, that's a real off-put, and does impact the employee experience for sure.
Yeah. And Radha, I'll just add to that quickly that, and then on the flip side, when you do have leaders who are really living and breathing that culture, how powerful is that, right? To bring everyone else along on that journey. So it has a big impact either way. So just wanted to add that in there. Yeah.
Thanks, Emma.
Yeah, I want to also say that setting the example, it's extremely important and a success key, for the culture. And also one thought that I had while Frank, you were speaking, is regarding specifically people first culture, is to be curious about them. Really be curious about getting to know them, how they feel, what they want, how you can develop them, how you make sure that the way they enter the organization, it's not the way they're going out, and they really went through something and experienced something that developed them along the way. I think this is an example of how to set an example, in leading the culture as a leader. So they are very, very important, I agree, in this journey.
Yep, another thumbs up to me for that. All right, so I'm wondering, there's all different sizes organizations, isn't there? We've been talking about skip levels, and but some organizations are small. So does employee engagement and the employee experience just belong to big corporates, or how does it apply to smaller companies as well? And I wonder if I'll come to Angela first on this one.
Yeah, it's kind of it's a common myth out there that I'm a little company, so I don't need to worry about it. That's just for the big guys with the big budgets. They're the ones that need to worry about culture and ping pong tables and latte machines and all of these things, because I think it becomes a misnomer about what culture is. And if culture is only about those things, then maybe it is just for the big boys with big budgets. But we've been talking about today that it's not about those things. It's really about who we are as an organization and how we want our employees to experience that. And that's going to happen at your company, no matter how big it is, if you choose to do that purposefully or not. Emma talked about it will happen organically. If you choose not to do it intentionally, it will happen organically. It just may not happen the way you want it. And so for a smaller company or a bigger company to realize that if we want to intentionally create what we want a certain kind of environment, a certain kind of set of behaviors, then we need to do that intentionally. It doesn't need to cost anything. It just needs to be about setting who we want to be. What are those behaviors that we want to be acceptable and unacceptable? How do we want to be with one another? How do we want to interact? And then again, as we said, let that then drive engagement. If you don't want high engagement and you don't want high performance, then okay, don't worry about creating a great culture. But if you do, no matter your size, you owe it to yourself to really spend some time in purposefully curating who do we want to be, how do we want that to be expressed, and we will see the outcomes come out of that. And again, you don't have to spend any money really to do any of that. It's just about how we interact and who we are with each other.
And
Yep.
I'm so glad you said that, Angela, about culture is not socializing. It's not ping pong tables. And I'm saying that probably every single day. It's so much more than that. That's maybe 2% of it. It's how we train and learn, how we work, how we talk to each other, communicate, celebrate. There's so much to it. So I think we really, really have to drive that point home constantly. And then also loved what you said about small organizations. And I think it's integral for small organizations to care about culture, especially as they grow, because what you're doing is you're planting seeds that are going to start growing in a certain direction. And it's way easier to build a culture than it is to change one that's been established on its own. So you really have to think about that from day one, from your first employee, who you are and who do you want to be.
And I must say, I'm working with small companies as well as with big and large companies. And I'm very happy to see that more and more small companies from the very beginning, like when they're already, 5 people, 10 people, 20 people, they're coming to me and say, what about the culture? I want to design the culture. I want to think about the culture. I want to understand which culture do I need. And so we do see the movement starting already, especially, by the way, with companies who understand that they are going to be global, very spread. And they understand that they will not see each other every day and will be able to impact, on a daily basis on all their employees. And they need to send or sometimes even hire outside of their originated country. And then the complexity begins. So they invest time in that, and they already are aware of the need.
Thanks, Elaine. Now, talking about curiosity and engagement, engaging with our audience. Our audience have there was a question in the audience, in the chat, about, is there experience here in the group on holding leaders accountable in their performance review and how they model company culture and core values? And I was going to start with Heather with that one, but anyone else can jump in. So.
Sure. Absolutely. I think that's table stakes. Every leader should be both expected to and evaluated based on how they represent and bring the culture and their values to their employees, just as every other employee should as well. And I think that's important. These values and the way that a company works and behaves doesn't fall just on leadership, doesn't fall only on HR or C-suite. Every single employee working at an organization should know what's expected of them in an outcome as well as a behavior, including leaders. So absolutely, that's integral.
In the company that I worked for as the CHRO, what we did with the culture is we, in the performance management review process, we had a specific part of the performance that we asked the managers to give some evaluation for all the employees regarding how they are demonstrating, the different values and behaviors that we chose to design as the culture of the company. And we did it year after year. So we slowly directed, the employees' behavior and awareness towards, the do's and don'ts that we want them to do, and the things that we wanted to see in their interaction, communication. So it was very helpful and very impactful over time.
Thanks. Background noise there. So now there can be a myth, I guess, and an expectation that dealing with culture and employee experience, it can be a big program, costs lots of money, and so it's really only viable in good times. So it's just something that we just can't afford to deal with all year round, no matter how the business is going. I'm wondering what your thoughts are on that, Emma.
Sure, absolutely. Great question. I think Angela touched on this a little bit already, right? Saying that you don't need dollars to do a lot of these things. And my personal experience, I work for a national nonprofit organization that is very financially stable, yet we're really mindful of how we spend our dollars and what we can do with our resources. So my short answer would be no. They're not only viable during good times, and if anything, they're more important during those tough times, right? Having that foundation of a strong organizational culture holds things together when you do have the downs, because companies are going to have ups and downs, right? Or during just times of maybe more change, which can be really difficult for employees and organizations to go through, both internal changes and external pressures. So I would say that, it's not really about good times and bad times. It's about really creating consistency throughout the ups and downs. And you don't need to invest dollars. If you're having good times and you can invest some dollars, fantastic. That's a wonderful way to show appreciation and to grow some of the programs. But the foundation of both the employee experience and culture, I think, really starts with some of the non-monetary items. Maybe aside from benefits, that's a big one, but that's a big one, of course. Benefits and rewards and recognition, maybe. But that would be my personal response there.
Sure,
Yeah,
thanks, Emma.
I completely 1,000,000% agree, and then some with what Emma said, and they don't cost a lot. So two things. One, I would say, what does cost a lot is the platforms that we're used to that is presented to us to make it palatable and easier to digest. I won't name those companies, but generally your assessments, because I'm always about the data informed, right? And because that will give you a little bit more prescriptive to go with your descriptive efforts and a little bit more sustainable. But many of your surveys are proprietary. They're not proprietary. They're copyright free. They're out there in the world. What vendors, and no offense to vendors, because I've been a vendor myself, vendors package it and sell it to you, and then they are part of your vendor list that, yeah, you're as a company, a bigger company, you're paying out. Yeah. And the more money you pay, the better the visualization, right? So you don't need necessarily Qualtrics. You can use Qualtrics, SurveyMonkey, or even if your company or you personally have Microsoft, you have Microsoft Forms. You get one of those assessments. You take what you like as far as the reliability and validity and what you're trying to actually measure. Do your own survey, and it could start as small. And I've done it with a company that's like 10 or less. It's a team, right? Hey. It's not statistically necessarily, you can't draw inferences, but it gives me a pulse of what's going on. Now, I think a success story around kind of when you use these people centered around the experience, both internal and external. A real quick story I can share with you, almost as a case study, and this was for the prior organization I worked with. It was something as great as scholarship. All right. So scholarship is a great external kind of, it's philanthropic, right? It's a responsibility for your corporation. And it's a great thing that employees love to get involved with in the culture. And part of this was, students at any age range would apply for scholarship, do a video, submit the video, and then employees at some part of during this process would, listen into this video that you presented, and then kind of using a rubric, determine who was really, certain categories was able to go on to the final round. And so employees love just jumping in on that. Here's the case study in the hiccup, that platform. The platform funneled thousands of video submissions down to what? Question mark. What was the parameters that it used? And then even when you got down to the submission, it was passion, which was measured the most, right? It had the greatest weight within this rubric. So again, you don't know what you don't know, and embracing it through skip level. And he's like, is this really helping? And what's the final output for the scholarships that I received? And the final output was the same demographic, the same experience every time. And folks were always questioning, well, your funnel was over here. And so I know we were talking about employee-centric, but this is just people-centric in general. Whose needs are being met? Whose needs are not being met? Who benefits from this? And who's being excluded? So it's almost embracing the other side of it. And once you challenge that, then you can question everywhere from the platform to the submission, and even this employee experience that centered us all. And that's just a case study I'd like to share, because I think when we were talking about connecting the dots and being an advantageous kind of corporation or company at any size, you've got to embrace the things that even you think are going well, both inefficient times for your business, and you kind of review those processes over and over. And you think, oh, well, we got all these submissions, we got all these applications, we've got all these things like that. Okay, number, right? Quantity is not always quality. So just kind of a small little case study I want to share with y'all, because even in scholarships where you think, this is supposed to, by the way, the scholarships are also available to employees. So it is important on that too, not just external, but employees. And it's like, wow, didn't even think about that,
And if I could jump in with maybe tying in the last couple of comments, that once you understand what's important to people and how you decide to bring that to life, it could cost absolutely nothing. And so if people say, this is a tiny little example, and yet it's impactful, I've seen it happen so many times. If what's important to people is that we engage with one another and that we are friendly with one another, and that may not be for every organization, but if that's something that an organization has said that's important to us, then maybe one of the ways you decide to express that is when you're on your Teams chat, you say hi first before you ask your question. Such a ridiculously simple explanation, and yet it costs zero to say, we're all going to agree that before I reach out with my question, I'm going to type in, hi, how are you, before I start asking my question. That has cost me nothing. All I'm using is my own resource as a company. And we've already just changed our culture because we've all agreed to that one behavior. And so it's just understanding what people want, what matters in your organization, and then the little things that can bring it to life that, again, don't have to cost anything.
And there's a lot of comments in the chat, which I love, about how do you really understand employees' experience, gather feedback from them. I think surveys are a fantastic way, but I think it was Wanda that said, having those conversations with employees and gathering their feedback. I completely agree. Obviously, you can't always talk to everybody, but I think in the true spirit of connecting the dots between the culture and the experience, that's where you're going to get the real information. Is asking your team, hey, what are you hearing? How did this thing land with employees? How did they experience this thing that I did culturally? What did it feel like for them? And the more you can gather that kind of data as well, which is kind of the retrospective, what did that feel like? The more you're going to understand your employees and can do better in the future. So I think you have to take kind of a multi-factor approach when gathering that feedback, but those informal one-on-ones, chatting with leaders, other HR members, I am constantly saying, tell me everything. What did that feel like? Did you like it? Did you hate it? That's crucial.
No, very true. And my experience, I'm in the Air Force, and I think one of the things that costs nothing but adds a lot of value is just picking on what you said about the debrief. Like what happens in the Air Force is, what's free is to come into these debriefs with curiosity. Come in to a debrief where it's not, you take your rank off. It's not about rank. It's about curiosity, asking questions, be able to feel safe and trusted that you can share things that went well, that things that didn't go as well, and feel that it's safe to do that without consequence from the leaders, from the people with rank. Those things, being able to do that and do that regularly, are all free, and that makes a remarkable difference in improving performance at in the Air Force, is my experience. So. Anything else? All right. So I'm just wondering, there's a lot of focus these days as well around inclusion and catering for quite a diverse workforce. And diverse workforce can mean many things. It can be the remote work. It can be different, the different generations. We've got so many generations in the workforce now, probably more than ever before. How do we ensure our cultural initiatives can embrace this diversity of what's in the workplace? Like, it is so diverse today, I think. Can't think of it ever being anything like this. Who would like to start that question? That's a pretty big one. I'll pick on someone. All right, I'll come to Angela.
I think it comes back to what Heather was saying and others about listening to people and understanding what it is that that people genuinely need and want in an organization, hearing that and then acting on it. Instead of assuming, we make so many assumptions and we think we know what people want, and we're almost always wrong. And just asking them what would really truly engage you as a person, and not maybe even as a representative of group X, but just who you are. What do you want, and how do we integrate that in, and then involve them in the process and really co-create it with them to ensure that we're including all of those different needs in the process. We're, as humans, we're all unique, and understanding what those uniquenesses are and what that brings, instead of pointing fingers or saying, here's the other thing that happens. And you mentioned generations. Especially when young people enter a company for the first time, we say, you have to come to us. You have to change for us. You have to adopt to our culture. Instead of saying, well, maybe there's some things that person's bringing that we can learn from, that maybe they've got a new way of doing things that we've never thought about. So just being open, understanding what everybody can bring, what people need. And maybe we can't make it all work, but we can certainly try, and we can certainly listen and hear what those needs are.
Thanks, Angela.
I would complement that with, first of all, make sure that we have diverse people in the organization. So, and bring, as many as we can. Build a very diverse community and organization. And then I would also add to what Angela said, make the culture very open to different opinions, and make sure that you create the environment for people to speak up, to come with their ideas, and to be even sometimes, to say, we don't want that, instead what we do want. So to really create the environment of an openness, speaking up, and also build a diverse workforce.
Thanks, Gillette. So I'll come to Frank on this one. I'm just building on what Angela was saying around like new employees. I'm just wondering, Frank, how does development and career pathways play a role in shaping this employee experience? What are your thoughts on that?
I mean, you still connect your prior question about a diverse workforce, both globally or geographically localized, wherever you're at, there's some humanistic needs that are there and that you can tie into career and keep it super simple. What is it? The big problems sometimes have the simplest solutions. And this is a bit backed by a lot of international research. One that I can point to is called GLOBE. GLOBE, Globe Leadership. It's assessed for 20 plus years, both for profit, nonprofit, on 90 plus geographic clusters around the world. So it's very sound assessment. And what I'll share is, going into the career pathing, there's 3 simplistic human behaviors regardless: competency building, autonomy, and belonging. What that looks like for your individual functions, workforce, or that employee experience is a bit different. So before you get to pathway, the competency in general, and this is backed by a number of meta-analysis, in general, our first 5 years of career, it's a bit of profiling. It is. First 5 years, you need a lot more support, a little bit more direction, regardless of how smart you are and how enthusiastic you are. 5 to 10 years, a little less. After 10, consider yourself a bit of an industry expert, right? So, and that also kind of is correlated a bit with your progression in title and experiences, and maybe you're leveling up on being a coach, a leader, right? A people leader, etc. Simple, but we don't do that. We just like, oh, where you worked at, what was the title you last held, what's going on, and just hire you and then just hit the ground running. But where are you in your career? Just a little bit, or having that conversation, centering the person. Autonomy, most people, although we love to be, and that's what's interesting about A and B, so CAB, CAB, the autonomy is, we do autonomy, and that helps out with geographic, with the ability or accessibility. You think about, again, it's been a bit used quite a bit, but as we think about the pandemic that we just came, and we may experience things like that again, is that it taught us a lot about the accessibility and getting into the brick and mortar office and things, right? But this will account for a number of different identities, experiences, and also geographical. That's a huge part of the diversity wheel and experiences. Geographic, or being a caregiver, being closer to my child's school or my extended family, etc. But we want a little bit of autonomy, so treat me like an adult, and focus on the deliverables that I do versus, oh, you were late or you're having to log off. Oh, but yeah, you also didn't recognize them all on late at night, and kind of still creating those outputs. Focus on the deliverables. Don't focus on me as a person necessarily, unless there's some history around there that gets very well documented. But the B around belonging is, what does the belonging really look like around that? So, before you even get into the career pathing, it's humanistically, simplistically, we all want competency building in our career. We do want autonomy, and we want to feel connected below below the surface level of your name and job title. And so, you work with your OD, you work with your HR partners, but you also work with your functional leaders and folks underneath the leaders, and say, is there really pathway? And defining the pathway is not always vertical, but also horizontal, right? Because that competency building, sometimes the intellectual stretch, it's called job crafting, has a lot to do with your task. And sometimes it's not always about, oh, I want to be a director now, senior director now, I want to be a VP, I want to be a senior vice president, I want to be no, not always. I just maybe, in that profiling and building up my career, maybe I just want to shift. Maybe now I'm interested in marketing, and I grew up in human resources. Maybe, maybe I'm in finance, and really I love legal all of a sudden. I don't know, right? But the stretch it can be defined that, and being very realistic is the last thing I'll say. Being very realistic with your workforce. Because they say, oh, we got great opportunity here. What does that opportunity really look like, right? Embrace that. Well, if you don't always have a lot of open roles, and people are like, I'm wondering how I can grow there, and you're selling them something else, you're already selling off the career pathing a different way. And so I just want to note that, is that be honest, and the career pathing can always be horizontal as well as vertical.
Thanks, Frank. I might move on. I just noticed we've only got 6 minutes left. This has gone too fast. I haven't been watching the time as well as I should have been. Now, typically we've got a HR audience listening to the panels and part of the panels. And I'm just wanting for us to leave with that audience some actionable steps that they can, take away starting tomorrow to enhance their employee experience, their company culture. So what sort of role do you see HR leaders have in doing that? So what are some steps we can share with the audience that we've got? And I'll just leave that open to anyone to have a go at this question.
I think as a good starting point, HR, I think, drives and can lead a lot of those initiatives, obviously in conjunction with the whole organization. HR doesn't own culture, but they support and influence it. But I think in order to go anywhere with it, you have to understand where you are starting from. So again, knowing who your employees are, what they value, what your current culture is, and that's the first thing you have to identify before taking any steps to change or impact experience.
Thanks, Heather. Who wants to add on to that?
I always think of HR as the playing the architect role in terms of construction of a building. That there's lots of different roles coming in to make that building happen. We're not necessarily the ones doing the construction, but we're certainly architecting the blueprints for some of it, and then pulling in the right people at the right times, and making sure that the right trades, so to speak, are interacting in the right places to ensure that to carry that metaphor, to ensure that the light socket is in the right place so that the couch can fit in the right section of the room later on. So we're not necessarily putting the light socket in place or putting the couch in place, but we're kind of seeing how all of those pieces interact and helping those different folks understand what their role is so that it's all congruent. Because again, that to me is the bottom line. If it's not all congruent, you're not going to get a good experience and you're not going to get great engagement at the end. So just kind of overseeing a lot of those pieces.
Thanks, Angela.
So I would add to initiate both the thinking and the designing of the employee experience and the culture, both, and then to lead it and to come up with initiatives that can support that and that can align with the culture that we want to see. And lastly, HR is also a leader around the table of the management, but also in other levels. And I think the HR needs to play as the example. It's even more strong with HR because they need to lead by example, and it is becoming very, very essential for us to initiate and then to lead by example the entire process.
Thanks. Thank you. All right. So 2 minutes to go. So if everyone can we'll just go around our virtual room, and what's the one takeaway you'd like people to take away from today's panel? So we'll start with Emma and we'll go around.
Sure, absolutely. So I'll say the top takeaway for building a people first culture is communication. It's come up a lot throughout today's discussion, and those open lines of communication so that you can understand what the people want and need and how they're feeling, right? And then also vice versa. So leaders and HR and anyone who's involved in leading some of this culture work, make sure you're talking about it and tell people how it's connected, tell people why it matters, engage in dialogue. So communication, I think, is core to this work.
Thanks, Emma. Dalit.
So I would add curiosity that I spoke about. Be curious about the people and also care about them, love them. Really love the people in your organization, to put them first.
Thank you. Heather.
I think just that culture, experience, engagement, those are so directly tied to financial and business metrics that you have to acknowledge that and find a way to show that to your business leaders. to show the value.
That's a very good point. Frank?
Invest in the structural environment that will then influence the behaviors and the great employee experiences for your workforce.
Thanks, Frank. And Angela?
Co-create. Don't just drive things from top down and say, this is what our culture is going to be today. This is what our experiences are going to be today, and you will be engaged. But co-create it with the employees, listen to what they have to say, involve them in the process, and they'll certainly be much more engaged as a result.
No, that's a great point. So, yes, I like Frank's little clap. All right. So, thank you to all the panelists for sharing your insights and experiences today. It's absolutely crystal clear that building a people-first culture is not a trend, but it's absolutely critical to happen for both the employees and for organisations. So, I hope everyone who joined today got some value from it today, and I look for and have a wonderful day. And I look forward to future panels with the panelists and with the audience as well. So thanks, everybody. See you.